Hello and welcome to Have a Nice Life, a career change survival guide podcast. And you're here with me, financial coach Hadassah Damien, and
me, career coach Pippi Kessler. And this episode is all about criteria, which is about figuring out what is a good outcome for you. Why we're talking criteria is that what a good job or a good life means to different people is totally different. So we can't just say, go have a nice life.
Nope.
If we don't know, or you don't know what that means for you.
Exactly. It's not about us telling you your nice life. It is about you telling you your nice life. So we're moving forward from thinking about things that are fully out of your control, systemic things, historical things, contextual things. That was the last episode. So if you want a little bit of saturating in the water we're swimming in, go back and listen. But we're moving to starting to identify what might be in your sphere of influence. So that's where we're headed. But on the way there, it's, well, how do I know I'm going somewhere that is good to me? You're setting your criteria. In this section, we're going to drum up specifics about what will make your life one that you want more. We're going to go from like a vague, squishy, WTF is life, but this swirl of things that have been put upon me and I don't knows, to, hey, here's some pieces that I might want or enjoy or even be thrilled to succeed at and get after.
In each section, we're also trying to prepare you emotionally for what you might need in your inner life in order to do the exercises. And for this step of choosing criteria, all you really need is a little bit of courage to explore these questions for yourself. So you really don't have to know the answers about what do I want, what's a good life for me at this moment of getting started. You just have to be able to say to yourself things like, you know what? I don't have to know. I'm just going to try to get in there and try to understand what I want and need. So all that we're asking at this point is just that you have that courage and that willingness to ask those questions, not that you know the outcome yet.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. We are not assuming that you've come to this episode immediately crystal clear on what a nice life is for you. In fact, we are going to go through in this episode 2 exercises, and then in a second episode, 3 more exercises so that you can start to figure out what those criteria are for you. Plus, there's going to be even more detail in the workbook. So, friend, you have options. You can do some of these or all of these exercises. You can bounce over to the workbook or somewhere else, and you can take all the time that you need in sorting through and percolating on your criteria. So with that, Pippi, get us started.
We're going to talk a lot in the exercises about what are the different needs that you have, what do you want, what's the best situation for you in your life. But before we do that, we have to talk about why it might be hard for you to tell the truth to yourself about what you need. And not to spoil the ending, but for some people, that reason is ableism. What ableism is, it's a system of oppression. And again, when we're saying the word oppression, it's talking about a systemic, big-scale unfairness that's giving one group an unfair kind of power in relation to another identity group. And it's giving people who are neurotypical, and what that word means is people whose brains work the way that the dominant culture expects, or people who are temporarily able-bodied, so people whose bodies are able to do all the functions that the dominant culture expects and work in the way that the dominant culture is saying, yeah, that's the best way. That's the best way to have a body and brain. And it's giving those people cultural and systemic advantages over people with disabilities. Ableism truly sucks for a lot of reasons. One reason is that it gives the false impression that there are normal people who are good, and then people who have quote unquote special needs, whose needs are bad. And this is completely untrue. There's immense human variation in how our brains and bodies work, and all people have a brain and body style, and all ways of having a brain and body are good. Here's an example of this, because when I say this, all brains are good, sometimes people are like, stop lying, but I mean it. Let me tell you why I mean it. So here's an example of this. ADHD is one type of way that bodies can be. There can be things that can be really frustrating for people with ADHD to navigate. Like sometimes people with ADHD describe having these moments of hyper focus where they experience it's like the rest of the world disappears. And this exact same brain style can be a really incredible gift. So if people with ADHD, you might have seen this. So if someone can hyper focus, they can enter into this state of flow and creativity that can yield these incredible things, like incredible insights, artwork, inspiration, and a kind of hyper presence that's really awesome to be around. So if you're hanging out with a person with ADHD, then you might have experienced this kind of transcendent fun of being in that hyper presence and hyper connection with them. And if you love someone with ADHD, which I do, I love a lot of people with ADHD, elements of their ADHD are likely to be at the heart of what you love the most about them. And having ADHD is just one example of the many ways a person can be. All ways of being have things that are harder and easier about them, and all ways of being are valuable and good. But because the ableism in our society is so strong, it can be really hard for people with brain and body styles that our society defines as disabilities to really feel in our guts that our ways of being are good and beautiful. And so it takes a lot of work to assert and reassert my brain and my body are just my anatomy. There's things that are both harder and easier for me, and that's neutral. And it can be even harder to say, I have a right to enjoy the way my brain and body work. And I have a right to build my life around what I need to thrive. I'm somebody who believes that you have a right to build your life around what you need to thrive. And our society is way behind on making it easy to do. You have a right to love how you are and what you need, even if there are people around you who won't get you or who are going to judge you or are going to try to get in your way. What I'm going to describe next is an exercise for thinking about what you need. And in the section afterwards, Hadassah is going to talk about figuring out some other stuff, like how much money you need and what kind of job will match your values. And why we want you to do this exercise first, if you're doing them in order, is that it's pretty hard to answer those questions without thinking in a deep way about what are my needs. Part of figuring out what we need is about accepting ourselves. And to accept ourselves, we have to tell ourselves the truth about what we need, even if we live in a world that isn't helping us do that. Here's an example from my own life. I have a brain and a body that is extremely sensitive. And this is called being sensory defensive, if you want to talk like an occupational therapist. I'm extra sensitive to all that micro information that comes through my senses. So I get really tired when I'm like in a crowd or a busy place or a loud place. And if I go to a big event, I get wiped out, sometimes for like several days. I get car sick really easily, even if I'm just on a car ride. If I'm working and there's like an air conditioner humming in another room, I feel like I can't concentrate. And I'm also really sensitive to temperature changes. So if the temperature in the room goes up 1 degree, I can tell. Like in my house right now where I'm recording this, the heat just came on and I felt like it was like trying to completely distract me from doing this. I'm like, how could you raise the temperature at a time like this when Hadassah and I are trying to record this podcast? And for a lot of my life, I really wished I was a different person. I felt really bad about myself for getting so overwhelmed by things that didn't seem to bother other people. I felt like I was being unnecessarily overreactive or like I was being a baby. But I overrode how I felt a lot of times. And I pushed myself to live in these giant cities for 20 years. Like I lived in New York City and in Boston. And eventually I came to have more acceptance about how my body worked. And I came to have more acceptance that I could wish that I was somebody else, but I'm really not. I'm me. And as I got to accepting myself more, I was able to see and appreciate more how my body style also helps me. I am a coach, which means that my entire job hinges on my ability to tell when there's unspoken changes in people's body language or in their affect. It's pretty inconvenient for me that I'm so impacted by tiny sensory changes like in my daily life, like when I'm at a grocery store. But when I'm facilitating a group, this same feature is so helpful for me because I can tell if somebody in the group is mad or scared and they're not saying it. I can feel that the temperature in the room is going up, and I can hear that people are changing the ways that they're breathing. And that thing that I know how to do, that actually is part of what helps people the most in my work, it stems from the neuroatypical parts of myself that I used to feel the worst about. I've come to accept that I'm a sensitive meat thermometer, and that's a fine way to be. And when I really accepted myself, I realized then I had to make some pretty big changes in my life. So I left New York City, I moved back to the woods, which is where I grew up, and I just had to accept I can't handle the sounds or the smells or the vibrations or the temperature changes of a big city. And I stopped doing some of the things that I used to force myself to do. So I used to push myself to go to these big events, and I just had to accept that a lot of times I can't tolerate it, even if other people can handle crowds easily, that I just can't always do it. That's my story, where I was really mad at myself for being a sensitive meat thermometer. And then I came to appreciate that it's fine to be a sensitive meat thermometer if my life is arranged more around that sensitivity. Here's the question for you. What would you try to change about your life if you completely accepted yourself? What comes into your mind when you hear that question? What situations and settings and conditions are ideal for you to help you thrive and get what you need? So later, Hadassah is going to ask you this same type of question, but she's going to ask about how much money you need, and that also is about self-acceptance. It might be about things like, okay, how close to the train do you need your apartment to be? And how much would that cost to move to that apartment, really? It might be saying, okay, do you need a budget for money to take cabs instead of walking home? And how often is that true for you, really? What do you know about what's true about how many hours is best for you to work in a day or in a week? And given that number, what does that mean about what you would need your minimum hourly wage to be, and what types of jobs does that rule out? So this is the connection between this kind of self-acceptance and some of this like logistical planning that we're going to start getting more into. Of course, the dynamics of capitalism and oppression don't always make it possible to make the changes our bodies need. And that's not our fault. But the first step to trying to get what we need is knowing what we need in the first place. And in order to know what we need, we have to accept what's true about who we are. This world right now is not the world that I want. In the future, I want to see all of our communities will be designed to normalize that there is immense human variation in what our brains and bodies need to thrive. In my dream world, I would want it to be easy for every person to know and to tell the truth about how they work, and for it to be easy to feel celebrated in the way that each of us are. And in the meantime, accepting who we are is like we have a little jewel that's tucked in our pocket that sometimes other people can't see that we're carrying. Even if the broader society is still filled with ableism, we have a right to feel that glow of self-acceptance, to feel that feeling of reaching into your pocket and knowing that there's something precious that you're carrying with you, seeing yourself just as having this treasured way of being, just the way you are. So here's the exercise. get out whatever tools you like. You can take a pen or a paper, you can type on your computer, you can free write, you can record a voice memo. And what I want you to do when you're writing or speaking or whatever thing you're dancing or however you want to answer these prompts, here's the prompts I want you to respond to. What would you try to change about your life if you completely accepted yourself? What situations, settings, and conditions are ideal for you to help you thrive and get what you need? What have you noticed about when your body is the happiest? What are the factors that your body cares the most about? How does your mind like to think and work? When are you the most creative? What do you love the most about the particular way your brain and body works? And here's the last prompt. What kind of life would be the most in your image? What kind of life would be set up for exactly the way you like to do things? So try the exercise and see what you notice when you answer those prompts.
Thanks, Pippi. And man, starting there is so important. Just really looking inward and practicing self-acceptance and not having to constantly try to change and shape ourselves to the world. We're going to move into a second exercise now. And this exercise is all about values and values mapping. So you want to take what you started to percolate in that Pippi had just guided you through. And now we're going to think about our beliefs about the world and our understandings about ourselves. So I'm going to back up a little bit and tell you about when I first used this exercise. So I went through a really big job and work life revision. I think of it as my personal big change number 2. And I'll talk later about big change number 1. But I had so many friends. I made art. I had the best cute thrifted vintage outfits. I was doing a little saving here, a little traveling there, but the money part just still wasn't working for me. I'd managed to get into a professional track career, working for nonprofits. Anybody else who's ever worked for a nonprofit knows that there is a certain type of nonprofit that just doesn't pay a lot of money. And for me, the way that systems of economics has played out in my family had both family to help and like historical financial gaps to fix. Like I was trying to fix my teeth and figure out where the hell I was going to ever come up with a down payment. Those were all things that were on me. So I was looking at my life and saying, okay, there's some things that are working and there are some things that are not working. And then meanwhile, I was always really curious about creative self-employment. It was a constant experiment for me. Oh, and we will talk about experiments in this series. And I was doing all these different smaller projects of my own, but I wanted to figure out how to get paid livably for them. Like, how do you really freelance? How much are you actually supposed to charge? Like, how do you get clients? How does this work? I was starting to get nervous for my future. I was like uncomfortable in my teeth. There was other type of ways that I wanted to be at work. And like sitting at the desk was just making my neck bones fall into each other. Has anybody else ever felt that? And meanwhile, I was like, but art doesn't pay. Art doesn't pay. What do I do? And I felt really lost just trying to determine other criteria besides creative stuff that nobody seems to pay for and make more money and save my neck. Like they were too general. They weren't helping me. So I started pulling together this other method that was helpful for me in this time of change. So why am I having you think about doing a values mapping? We talked about this a couple episodes ago. Jobs are a requirement. They are foisted upon us in order to get money, which is the tool that we use to satisfy needs and some desires. But since we have to do a job, it's also an opportunity to weave in ways that we want to be and feel and the kind of contributions we ultimately want to make to the world. And it's not that we have to be creating a job that is perfect. There is no perfection. But what I'm saying here is that if we understand ourselves, what we care about, what we want to do, we can potentially bring more of that in and weave in pieces of it into the work that we're going to have. So this exercise is about finding what those things are so that you can decide if you're going to choose and customize the work that you're going to do and see what you need to bring in to suit you better. Pippi makes this great point that naming what we want when it comes to work can be very impossible, right? You didn't show up to this podcast knowing exactly precisely what you want to do with your work and life. This exercise is not about job titles. There are some of those later. This is about how you want to be and feel and what you like to do, what's easy for you, and the values that matter to you. And I want to shout out some of the sources and inspiration for pieces of this. Finding Right Work by Lenny Miller, Leni, had some of these pieces in there. The idea of including desire came from a book called The Desire Map by Danielle Laporte. And I included some of the other pieces thanks to my integrative herbalist, Avi Rose, who contributed some other ideas here. So the values map that I've developed that I'm proposing to you all is a mashup of questions from these teachers, but in my own words. So this exercise has 6 concepts I want you to engage with: values, strengths, talents, priorities for work, rhythms for life, and desires that matter to you and feelings that you want to have. So as you go through a values map, you are going to think about what's true for you in each of these categories. So I'm going to tell you how to do the exercise and then repeat the categories and give you a little more detail. And the way that I did this exercise was I drew the values map, like a little table in my notebook, and I took some days to reflect, and I took some notes as I went about my days. I looked back at what some of my former bosses or managers and collaborators had said about working with me and about my work, because it was helpful to keep me honest, but also to not minimize some of my ways that I am. And after taking some time to percolate and looking back over at what other people had said about me, I sat down and filled in this little table in 20 minutes. I also could have reached out to people that I previously worked with. I could have asked friends. I could have asked people that I'd made art with or been in community with what their perceptions were. Sometimes getting an outside point of view can be really helpful, especially if we feel unclear or notice that we tend to self-minimize or to dim our lights. For you, you can draw, you can write, you can type, you can take a voice note. It doesn't matter how you document as long as it's a documentation that you like to use. But in some way, I want you to document your self-understanding for each of these 6 categories separately. So let me go into them a little bit more. Values. That's, what do you care about? What matters to you? Like, often we're like, I have values. What are they? List some. There's so many fantastic lists of potential values that you can find online. I'm not going to just give you a laundry list. I trust that you can go look them up if you need, or just write down what's true for you. Values. Number 2, strengths. What are you strong at doing? What are you practiced at? This doesn't have to be physical strength. This is just like, where do you show up in what you do? And this could be work related or otherwise. Sometimes looking at our community work, our creative practices, the way we are with our friends or families can be really useful in thinking about our strengths. And I like this question as, what would I say and what do others say? It can be really interesting to get other people's feedback, or just to stop and imagine and put yourself in someone's shoes. What would somebody else say about what I'm strong at? Next one, talents. What are my gifts? What is unique to me? What are the things that I just find myself naturally gifted at? What would I say and what would somebody else say? Asking your friends and loved ones to reflect what they think your gifts are can be such a fascinating conversation, and it could be something that you could share with each other and you could reflect back to each other as a relational exercise. But what are my particular gifts and strengths? Don't have to be the same thing, right? I'm actually like a pretty good website developer as a strength. I don't think it's one of my gifts, and it is certainly not one of my priorities, right? We can be good at things that we have to grind through. Next, priorities for work. So what matters to me when it comes to working? What do I want to do with a work life? What outcomes do I want? And so that could be everything from thinking back to our anti-ableist self-acceptance, knowing that we don't want to sit all day long, or knowing that we are actually really interested in having like long, quiet focus time with then little jolts of talking to people. Or it could be knowing that you just want to be around people all day and you get lonely if you're not. Your priorities might be working on really big projects that are contributing to society or the environment or democracy or whatever, right? What outcomes do I want? Are there certain things that really make you feel excited thinking about 5 or 10 years in the future? Or are you someone who's, you know what I want with my job? I want to be able to close the door and be done. I want to work with my hands. I want to, like, there are so many different things that might come to mind for you, for your work priorities. Next one, rhythms of life. What do you want your days to be like? Like literally, as you move through time, what would you like to be happening? And this one really calls back to the exercise that Pippi was just having us think about. Do you want time to noodle in the morning? Do you want to make sure that you have spacious time at the beginning of your day so that you can get your kids ready for school and then get to work in like a more spacious, unrushed way? Do you want to be able to, my brain just, the question you want to ask yourself, and this is a hard question, is what should my days be like, considering that I need to have a job fit into my time? So yes, feel free to go ahead and have some post-capitalist imagination if it makes you feel good, but also ask yourself this question of what rhythm do I want to be in my life? Do I want to be able to take summers off with my kids or my family? Do I want to work for a couple weeks and then have some downtime to make art? What is that? What are the rhythms you need in life? And then the last quadrant is desires and feelings. How do I want to feel? What would I like to experience, and how do I want to be? For me, when I was doing this exercise, one of the things that came up was joy, which is basic, but look, I was not having a lot of joy at work before this, okay? I was having a lot of hunching over a laptop, feeling tired. Even though I had wonderful coworkers and things like that, I was not like, oh boy. And so to me, identifying joy as something that I wanted to be able to come into my work life was really important, because it meant I needed to be doing different things and be able to show up in different ways. And it really led me to wanting to work more one-on-one with people and facilitate groups of people, because there's so many moments that I can bring joy in for myself and for the group or for the other person. So how do you want to feel, and what do you want to experience when you're actually working? And so using this exercise, I'd like you to review and reflect on all 6 of your responses together. You could try thinking of them like a story, where the main character, which is your future mysterious job, is this not yet known being that's described by these responses. You could think of them like a game of charades. You can describe everything except the name of the thing. What's the thing? You could think of them like a cut paper silhouette piece of art, where you can see the outside, but the interior is missing, right? But the outside shapes the interior. That shape is what you're building for yourself. I want you to percolate a little bit on who that character might be, or the shape of the thing. The goal here is to emerge with some insights, which are just observations about patterns, or the larger story that you see when you're connecting these dots together. And I know that sometimes people can look at this amalgamation, these values, strengths, talents, work priorities, life rhythm, desires, and feel dissonant. You might look at that and be like, who is that person? And do I know them? Putting yourself together in this frame could be surprising. It's old information, but you're looking at it in a new way. So if you're finding yourself getting stuck, see if it helps just to go a little bit further with this concept of meeting a stranger. If this wasn't someone that you yet knew, what emerged? What does this person want, need, succeed at, or not want to do? There's information in there, even if you don't feel deeply personally connected right away to what you come out with. but you might actually have a whole bunch of light bulbs in there. So you're going to take these insights forward into your brainstorming. In the next episode, we're going to tell you a little bit more about how to weave your criteria together. But for me, I use this values map to help me define the types of jobs, to understand the shape of the things that I would apply for. Ultimately, it led me to hone in on technology, design, process, facilitator roles, things I was good at, things I knew, ways I wanted to be. And by the way, when I started that process, I had no idea that was a thing. It is 100% a thing. I applied for a type of role. I got hired. It's been a wonderful ride. I was with that organization for 2 years. I got laid off. Doesn't matter. Got a different job and started my own business. It kicked me off into a whole series of roles that I wouldn't have imagined. So today I get to be a facilitator, coach, strategist because I started to say and understand that I wanted spaciousness. I wanted joy. And I wasn't afraid of working. I just didn't want to grind all day at a laptop anymore. Values mapping to help you understand a little bit more about the ways that you are and want to be in work.
Wow, thanks, Hadassah. Those are such great prompts that you're describing about how to think about different aspects of what a person might want.
The ones about your strengths and talents can be really interesting and fun to dig into. For me, one of the biggest light bulbs was that those two are not the same thing. And letting it be true that those aren't necessarily the same thing, and then deciding what to do about that.
Yeah, that's such a great thing, too, that you're highlighting, just that you're not obligated to your strengths. Like, just that because you're good at something that you're not then, like, in a death pact with the devil.
Correct.
Where you have to do, like, oh no, I'm good at piano, but I don't want to be a musician.
Yeah.
Sorry, too bad.
Yeah, no, you don't have to people please some internal critic in your head that says you have to use this skill that you have. It's also okay to have liked and enjoyed using skills over the course of your life and then put them down. But just giving yourself this gift of starting to differentiate and get specific in these different criteria areas, which is why, friends, we're having you do these exercises and take your notes, drawings, voice memos, whatever you like. Because sometimes these things swirl around in our heads and we don't take a pause to actually say, what are they? What is the piece of me that I need to accept? Or the piece of me I just need to name and decide that it's okay not to leverage.
Some people, just hearing us say these different prompts, have a kind of aha moment. But if that's not you, don't worry. You're fine. You're good. Here's why it's okay if you're not getting some kind of flash of insight at this point after doing those prompts or exercises. The first is that in the next episode, we're going to give you some more exercises for thinking about criteria. The second is that what Hadassah was talking about, where she did these exercises and then she was able to get this like negative space image of some kind of job she might like, but the job that actually she ended up doing, she didn't know about yet. And what that's an example of is this coaching principle of what, not how. And we're going to talk more about that in the next episode. But the basic idea is that when you're doing this kind of criteria discernment, you are not responsible for how you're going to get it done. So you don't have to know how you would make your life like that or how that could be possible. You really don't have to know. So if right now you're starting to feel a little nervous of like, well, why am I even bothering saying I want summers off? How would that ever be true? It's fine. You don't have to understand that yet because there could be a lot of ways you to get that done. It could be because you're a teacher and you get summers off. It could be because you do seasonal work. It could be because you do really high paying work where you're able to self-fund seasons off. So you don't have to know why you might be able to do these things. Right now, when we're working at criteria, you're just paying attention to what do I want?
That's right. Thank you for listening in on the first 2 criteria setting activities. And I hope you tune in to the next episode where we're going to give you just a little bit more. So again, this has been Have a Nice Life or Have a Nice Life. You decide how to say it. I'm Hadassah Damien. I'm here with Pippi Kessler, and we are having a nice time. giving you all of these ideas. So thanks for listening.